Hello, Anne. Let's get right to your portfolio review. Okay, your first shot, fantastic buildings. They're very sharp, delineated, and they have already perfectly vertical, which is really good for architecture. One thing I do see is that we have a little bit of noontime haze, and that also produces a little bit of blue light, so we're going to fix that first. Now, if you are using Lightroom CC, you can go down to Effects, and there's an option called Dehaze. Let's just increase dehaze. And do you see what happens? Now, we're not going to go this far, but dehaze has the ability to sort of, it's a type of contrast, but it's not exactly light contrast. And it's just getting rid of that ultraviolet haze that happens at noontime. Now, if you don't have dehaze, that's okay. You can try a touch of clarity, but I wouldn't use clarity too much on this one. One thing that we will do is go to color, and we are going to warm up the picture. Okay. Now, I know that when you see this, you're going to say, no, don't do that because you're going to ruin the blue sky and the blue water. I understand that, but we'll get to that in a second. Now, what we have here is a warmer toned green area. We have a little bit more inviting look to the buildings. So let me show you the before and after. Here's the original. It's a little bit bluish with a bit of haze. Now we've reduced the haze and we've warmed up the picture. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is to bring back bluishness into the water. And we're going to do that through what's called a linear gradient tool. And first of all, I'm going to reset all of my previous adjustments. Make sure that I don't interfere with this new picture. Now, a linear gradient tool is very interesting because all you need to do is go to the bottom of your picture, drag up this movable series of 3 lines, and now watch what happens when I add blue, or I go to the opposite when I add orange or yellow. So we're going to want blue. Now, it's important that you don't overdo this because it looks fake. However, let's just move this up just a touch. Okay, and let's back out and take a look at the shot. Now, that is fairly decent. It may be a little bit too obvious that it's an edit. So I'm going to reduce the temperature. Maybe just about there. I think that's probably good, like -50 if you're using Lightroom CC. Okay, so that's good. And let's just also try to see what we could do about this blue sky up here. So we're going to go to color. And what you need to do is locate one of these little circles that closest matches the sky. So let's go to blue, and let's see if that changes anything. We're going to change hue just a little bit, and we're going to bring saturation up just a little bit. Now, we don't want to sacrifice the warmth that we created down here, so it's sort of like a little bit of a trade-off. Now, if you have the time to get into some really fine-tuned editing, you can go to your brush tool. Let's just reset this here. And you can actually brush on blueness. Now, watch what happens when I do this. You see, everywhere I put the mouse or the cursor, we're getting more blue. Now, this selective adjustment is a really good idea if you have the time to go in and do some really fine-tuned work. If you don't feel like you have the time, because you actually have to clean up the edges around buildings, and that takes a little bit of effort and time. I'm going to reduce the blue just a little bit to make it look a bit more realistic. Okay, so a little bit more. And down here, okay, that's good. I'm just going to go back to the linear gradient, and I feel it's still a little bit too obvious, so I'm just going to reduce the blues a little bit more. Okay, that's good. And one more thing here. Let's do one more linear gradient. We'll reset the temperature. Watch what happens here. This time I'm going to create the gradient in the middle of the city, and I'm going to warm it up. Not too much, just a little bit. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now I'll back out, and let's see what the image looks like here. Yeah, I think that looks good. So let's go to the original. Here's the original, a bit bluish, but now we've sort of made the picture warmer, but also hopefully retained some blues. Now I'm actually looking at this, I'm not totally happy with the linear gradient, so I'm going to go back to the linear gradient, I'm going to tap on it, and I'm going to increase the gradient a little bit more. And what that will do is, it didn't have too much blue up here by the shore. Now it's a little bit better. Okay, so that's the value of linear gradients. So I think you did a great job on this photo, and let's get to your next shot. Okay, so your next shot is really nice. I don't even know what type of flower it is, unfortunately. I'm very bad with names of flowers and so on. However, I think that we can make this image even more powerful. Now, the big thing that I see is that this leaf is visually distracting. And I know that often you can't do a thing about that, because when you're photographing plants, you don't have the liberty to take a pair of scissors and to cut off leaves, because often you're in gardens and you don't have permission to do that, and in fact it may be harmful to the plant. So what we have at our disposal is cropping. If you if you haven't been able to go back to the same scene. So with regards to cropping, there's nothing wrong with doing a tight crop, as long as the picture looks balanced. Now, because we got rid of this extraneous element, which is the leaf, and we cropped in, the picture currently is not balanced. And how do we know that? Well, because the middle point of the flower is the most important, and it's off to the side. So that's why we're going to crop, so that we have a very balanced picture. Now, if you can see my grid lines here, at this point, the middle of the flower is dead center. And that's exactly what we want. Okay, so let's accept that crop. Now what we have here is a picture that's almost a little bit vertical. Now if you wanted to print this out, I would suggest that you actually just make it a square, because you can get square frames very cheaply. So let's go to the crop. And the aspect ratio, instead of custom, we are going to go to 1 times 1, or 1 by 1, which equals square. So did you see what happened there? It's telling us what the square crop will be. And then we can move the picture around till we get the exact composition that we like. Okay, so that is what I feel is probably the best way to present this particular picture. And I hope you like it. Of course, the cropping principles often are more subjective than objective. So feel free to adjust as you like it. Now, I know that a lot of people who are printing for fine art or selling fine artwork would probably go even further by, in Photoshop, getting rid of this area here and also getting rid of this area here. Now this is debatable, because a lot of people photograph for realism. Other people photograph for fine art and they'll adjust it any way they see fit. This is purely up to you. Now one thing you could consider is that if you want this picture to be more of a fine art shot, it may look better in black and white. Now there's many ways to create black and whites. In Lightroom, of course, we have the option of the channel mixers in the color area, and what that does is it allows you to adjust certain channels color channels to make a black and white of your liking. Now, if this is a little bit too complex, don't worry. Go to presets and then play around with the black and white presets. For example, high contrast, punch, low contrast, flat, soft, infrared. Now, flat is an interesting option because it's very popular these days, especially for Instagram. I don't know if it will remain popular a year or two down the road, but at this point, sort of a flat look is probably really good if you want to present your work right away or even print it out. Okay, so we're going to go to the X, and there we go. So what do you think? It's debatable. With the color shot was excellent, and this black and white I think is certainly passable as well. Okay, so let's get to your next picture. Now in this shot, I really like it. I find it's a happy shot. The family's out for a swim. I just want to give you a little technical note here. Most software for editing allows for what's called highlight adjustments. Now, watch what happens when I adjust highlights. Do you see how you're getting more information in the very bright areas? Let me take it back. Here's the original. And it's a little bit too blown out, these highlighted areas. It's just purely the reflection from the water. However, when you reduce the highlights, you can retain detail a lot more. Now, I went to -100, which is not really acceptable. That's a little bit too much, but around -50 would probably be fine. And that will give you more information in the highlighted areas. What else can we do? Well, I think this picture deserves a little bit more selective color adjustments. So let's go to color. And first of all, let's go to green. Let's try to jack up the green. And if you play around with hue, you can actually make the green lily pads even more vibrant. And with the blues, let's increase the saturation of the blues just a little bit more, and that will bring out the blue sky. Okay, so that's pretty much what I see for this shot. It can't be changed now, but I'd love to see a little bit more breathing room on the left. So I don't know. I'm sorry if it's a duck. I don't even know if it's a duck or not. But this bill, I want to see a little bit more of the animal's head. So a little bit more space here would be great. Okay, let's go to your next picture. Now this shot really grabbed me. I love it. I think it's fantastic. Now what I'm going to suggest is a little bit debatable, and I know a lot of photographers would say, no, keep it in because it's part of the picture, it's the shadow. Now I always love shadows of birds or anything walking past a scene. However, I may be inclined to erase this shadow because it's not big enough to register as a secondary element or a secondary subject. So whenever we're dealing with, well, let me back up. This is the primary subject, it's the bird. The secondary subject could have been the bird's shadow, but there's not enough of the shadow for this to become a legitimate secondary subject. So that's why I would tend to just erase it. So under the healing brush, I would just clone it out as best I could. Now, I will readily admit that Adobe Lightroom CC is not the best at cloning. It does a fairly decent job, but I think that probably very few people would know that's cloned, so I think that we're successful there. One other thing is I really like to see just a touch of breathing room here. Now, I know it's impossible to have bird photography perfect every time. It's so difficult to do bird photography. And what you did here was really good, by the way. So my inclination is to, if you're okay with this ethically, excuse me, is to just get rid of this spot here. And what that would allow, we're just going to reduce the feather a touch. And that allows just a little bit more breathing area on the edge of his wings. I didn't do a very good job there. Let me see if, there, that's a touch better. Okay, so that looks good. And if you were wanting to frame this, I would also bring the crop up. Actually, let me change that. I want to show you, see this little lock area? If that is locked, then you're going to want to click it and unlock. That will allow you to do a free crop. So you may want to actually crop up a little bit. And even though you may have to buy a custom frame, this panoramic look is a little bit more dynamic, in my opinion. Okay, so that is the end of your 4 photos. I really enjoyed going through them, Anne. Great work. Very impressed with your images, and I hope that these reviews have helped. All the best.